Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Miguel and this is what I learned today. Today we are going to dive into a world shaped by centuries of oppression and inequality. Our focus is the caste system in India, a social hierarchy officially abolished in 1950 but still deeply ingrained in the lives of millions. Let's go. So, the caste system in India is one of the oldest social hierarchies in the world. Its origin date back over 2,000 years to texts like the Manusmriti, which outlined a rigid social structure. Society was divided into four main varnas or castes. First, the Brahmins, priests and scholars considered the purest, Kshatriyas, warriors and rulers tasked with protection and governance, Vaishyas, merchants and traders responsible for commerce, and Shudras, laborers serving the upper castes. Beyond these groups were the Dalits, once called untouchables, and the Adivasis, indigenous tribes, who were excluded from the caste system altogether. Dalits were regulated to performing degrading and unclean tasks, such as manual scavenging, leatherworking, and disposing of dead animals. Hindu doctrines reinforced the belief that one's caste was determined by karma from past lives, ensuring lifelong discrimination for lower caste individuals. According to these beliefs, a person's birth into a specific caste was viewed as a result of their actions in previous incarnations. Now, this religious justification perpetuated systemic inequality as it framed caste as divinely ordained or immutable. Those born into lower caste were taught to accept their suffering as deserved and inevitable, discouraging resistance and change. Now, this ideology also created a social stigma around interacting with lower castes. Upper caste individuals avoided any physical or social contact with Dalits, fearing pollution. Such beliefs extended to public spaces, ensuring that Dalits were denied access to temples, water wells, and schools, further cementing their exclusion. The caste system thus created a deeply ingrained hierarchy with marginalized communities were trapped in a cycle of poverty, servitude, and stigma. So, historically, Dalits and other marginalized groups were restricted to roles deemed undesirable or impure by society. These roles included manual scavenging, cleaning human excreta without protective equipment, waste picking and drain cleaning, tasks that expose workers to severe health risk, leatherworking, processing animal skins, considered impure in many traditions, handling dead animals, including removal and disposal, which further marginalized them. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, sanitation work was classified as essential, yet workers received inadequate protective gear. Vanita Salvi, a Dalit sanitation worker in Mumbai, cleaned hospital wards with just a single layer cloth mask and earned a meager 8,500 rupees, which is equal to $115 a month. Her plight underscores the undergoing exploitation and discrimination faced by Dalits in these professions. Caste discrimination affects every aspect of life for Dalits and Adivasis, from housing and education to healthcare and unemployment. During crisis, these inequalities become even more apparent. Limited access to resources. Dalits often live in segregated areas far from essential services. Exclusion from aid. Historical instances like the 1918 Spanish flu and the 2004 tsunami revealed how caste determined access to relief. During the COVID-19 pandemic, similar patterns emerged. In many cases, dominant caste accused Dalits of spreading the virus, further isolating them. Economic exploitation. many Dalits lack the identification documents needed to access government subsidies, thus trapping them in cycles of poverty. Despite centuries of systematic oppression, marginalized communities have fought tirelessly for justice. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, a Dalit leader and architect of India's constitution, dedicated his life to dismantling the caste system. He argued that true equality only could be achieved by eradicating castes altogether. In 1956, Ambedkar converted to Buddhism, rejecting Hinduism's caste-based doctrines, and inspired millions to seek dignity and equality. Today, organizations like the National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights and activists such as Bina Palikal continue the fight. Political movements like the Bahushan Samaj Party provide platforms for Dalits to voice their demands and advocate for policy change. Although the caste system was officially abolished in 1950, discrimination persists in both subtle and overt forms. In rural areas, Dalits often live in segregated settlements, physically cut off from schools, markets, and healthcare facilities. Such isolation leads to limited access to basic services, perpetuating cycles of poverty and exclusion. In urban areas, discrimination takes on less visible but equally harmful forms. For instance, Dalits frequently face bias in job markets, with employers hesitant to hire individuals from lower castes. Even when employed, they are often confined to low-paying, hazardous jobs, reinforcing social hierarchies. Economic data shows these inequalities. Around 50% of scheduled tribes and Dalits live below the poverty line, compared to just 15% of upper castes. This divide is further increased during the crisis. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Dalit communities were frequently denied access to relief services, with reports of aid workers prioritizing dominant castes. Educational opportunities also remain unequal. Dalit children often attend poorly funded schools and face discrimination from teachers and peers. This lack of quality education limits their future prospects, creating yet another barrier to upward mobility. The intersection of caste and gender adds another layer of complexity. Dalit women, in particular, face both caste-based and gender-based oppression, making them more vulnerable to violence, exploitation, and social exclusion. Despite these challenges, there are stories of resilience and progress. The Dalit-led initiatives in entrepreneurship, education, and politics are creating new opportunities for empowerment. Grassroots movements and advocacy campaigns are also working to dismantle systemic barriers and promote inclusivity. The caste system has inflicted unimaginable pain on generations of marginalized communities. It's a story of exclusion, injustice, and survival. Yet, it's a story of resilience and hope. As we reflect on the struggles and resistance of these communities, let us commit to challenging the system that perpetuates inequality. 5 key takeaways. The caste system, though officially abolished, continues to impact millions through systemic discrimination. Dalits and Advisasis face severe economic and social exclusion, particularly during crises like the COVID-19 pandemic. Historical injustice, such as during the Spanish flu and natural disasters, highlight the deep-rooted inequalities of caste. Activists and organizations continue to fight for equality and justice, inspired by leaders like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Despite challenges, the resilience of marginalized communities offer hope for a future free from caste-based oppression. Guys, this was a very interesting subject for me. I thought it was quite interesting to see that this caste system, more like a class system, but instead of wealth determines by where you were born or who you were born to. I thought it was quite fascinating and interesting. I hope you learned something. I'm Mikel, and this is what I learned today. Bye.